Hi everybody, this is Leo Volont with part 4 of this series. This is the chapter heading for my blog. Part 4, Jesus the Jew versus Christianity. Western Catholic divergence from Paul in the Middle Ages, a good thing. Marian Catholicism, monastic religious orders and civilization. Purgatory, a good thing. Clerical corruption, indulgences, Paul's doctrine of amoral election and predestination. The printing press and Protestantism resurrects Paul the vampire. Let's start reading. Oh, by the way, we all need to keep in mind that this divinity of Paul is an exclusively Protestant thing. Western European Catholics since the Dark Ages, who had a civilization to run, were never under the illusion that Paul was anything but evil, and that he would be a horrible influence on the people. And so they left Paul ignored and undisturbed in the forgotten back pages of the New Testament. We should remember that these were the days before the printing press, and Bibles were not available for public consumption, and so a liturgical silence in regards to Paul was enough to keep that vampire effectively nailed up in his coffin. You know, if you don't mention him in church, no one hears about him. You know, I looked up various web pages for lists and chronicles of medieval names from the 11th to the 13th centuries, which is where I stopped looking, and I did not find a single entry for Paul or anything like Paul. So it seems that the Catholic Church really had erased Paul from the public consciousness. And yes, the Catholics redefined salvation to no longer mean free sin by formulating a purgatory to effectively take the place of the old hell. But purgatory was a much more refined, even elegant concept. You see, hell was defined as being eternal torment, whereas purgatory would be only some limited, finite, indeterminate amount of time, in the sense of as long as it takes. The idea there is that sins could be burned away in purgatory by the divine light shining down through the cracks in the floor of heaven, and that when the soul is finally clean, pure, and worthy of heaven, he or she would be welcomed into eternal bliss and the heavenly community of saints. The Catholic heaven would not have all the muddy footprints and that bus station smell of a Protestant heaven. Why do bus stations smell like that anyway? Well, Western Catholicism peaked during the High Middle Ages in the 11th and 12th centuries at around the time of the First Crusade and St. Bernard. More than 1,000 cathedrals were built across Frankish Western Europe just in the 11th century alone, using primarily community funds and labor from both the rich and the poor classes alike. It seems that Marian Catholicism, with strong leadership and examples from the religious monastic societies, had created a largely unified society. But then along came the late medieval church, which had its problems. It seems that so much money was involved in organizing and deploying crusaders to the east that the popes became addicted to the money flow, and so eventually they got so corrupt that they would only appoint bishops who would assure them an unobstructed access to graft, skims, and kickbacks. One must remember that the popes and bishops were very familiar with the doctrines of Paul, and so they had no reason to hesitate regarding the morality of any of this. You see, if you are familiar with Paul's letters to the Corinthians, which the bishops were, you would know that the rich and the powerful have their own special form of salvation. Salvation by election or predestination. That means that because God is omnipotent and wills all things, that if you are rich and powerful, it shows that God has already, by your creation, shown an explicit preference for you, which, for some reason, is supposed to naturally follow from earth to heaven when you die. Well, yes, Jesus in his ministry had said that rich was more likely to be detrimental. But Paul contradicts this and claims just the opposite, which is another reason why Paul had to become divinized through the every word doctrine, so that he would have the power to countermand Jesus on this very important right-wing talking point. But let's get back to the decline of Catholicism in the late Middle Ages. It seems that the popes and the bishops came up with an ingenious way to exploit purgatory. You see, the Pope, using his traditional powers as vicar of Christ on earth, could write up and distribute indulgences that could exempt sinners from purgatory. Well, thus effectively bringing back a kind of Paul's free sin. It's muddy footprints in heaven again. Except it wasn't free, but very expensive, and only the wealthy could afford to pay for these indulgences. Well, this corruption provoked a Protestant rebellion at just the time that the recently developed printing presses were churning out Bibles in all the vernacular languages, not just Latin, giving a wide voice to Paul's free sin doctrines. The name of Paul would skyrocket in the birth records, showing name recognition. To show that Protestantism had its heart in the wrong place from the very beginning, we should point out that it was the greatest complaint of that very first Protestant, Martin Luther, that the church was suppressing Paul's free sin doctrine, and that the common people had every bit as much right to free sin as any rich man who could afford to pay for an indulgence. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. How do you turn this thing off?